In this video we're going to talk about how we can use the keys within the graphics window to maybe control something, or using Q to quit, or those kind of ideas. So this is quite a different concept, because we're going to use what's called events. So I'm going to go to the very top of my code to start with, and I'm going to say graphics window dot key down. Now it says here this raises an event when a key is pressed down on the keyboard. Now you've also got one for when the key is lifted up from the keyboard, but in most cases we're just going to need key down. So basically this is very different. You notice you've got this green symbol to make the point that this is an event, and all it does is it tells the computer that every time it recognises that you must run a particular sub. So I'm going to choose the key down option, and graphics window.keydown, we just say equals, and then we'd say the name of the sub that we want to run. So we haven't created a sub that I'd like it to run yet. Let's call this sub. I'm going to call it which key, and you'll see why in a second, because all key down does is check that a key has been pressed and then run the which key sub. So to tell it which sub to run, I'm just going to write which key in here. So it will run this sub. We better check that this is just working, so why don't we say graphics window key down equals which key, which means it will constantly loop and check to see if the key's been pressed. So we don't need to put this check into a while loop. That's what's special about events. We just write the line of the code at the very top of our code, graphics window.keydown, and any time that it triggers, it will run the which key sub. You don't need to have multiple ones of these for different keys. You just need one if you're going to be using the keyboard. So sub which key, and when we run the which key sub, all I want it to do is, maybe let's just print something to the text window, just because it's a nice easy way to check that it's working. Text window dot write line, let's just say key pressed. And sub. Let's just run and see if that works. Oh, circ direction is used, but its value is not assigned. We must have deleted that earlier on. Oh no, it's because we changed it to be circ x. So line 32, circ x equals, we need an x in there. Problem solved. So our game's running at the moment. Let's ignore the ball, because we're really just checking for a key. And if I press the space bar, we see a text window's appeared. Let's just move the graphics window out of the way so we can see. It says key pressed. Let's click back in the graphics window and try a few more keys. And you notice it's pretty quick at responding to the fact that a key has been pressed. You'll notice that when I extended the graphics window and press keys, nothing happens. It's because it's only triggering within the graphics window. So if I click back to the graphics window and then press lots of keys, you'll notice that I get that interaction back. So this is working beautifully. Wouldn't it be nice to know which key is being pressed? So at the moment it just says write key press. We'll get it to write whatever the last key was. So if we say graphics window dot last, and we've got this command last key, gets the last key that was pressed or released. And that's all it does. So we may as well store that in a variable. So let's call it last key equals. And so we just store whatever the last key was in the variable last key. And rather than write key pressed, well, why don't we still write key pressed, but we'll also write which key was pressed. So if I just put last key in here as well. So not only do we write that the key was pressed, we say which key was pressed underneath it. So again, we'll run our graphics window, and if I press the space bar, it says key press space. If I go and type keys on the keyboard. Sure enough, it recognises what's been typed. Now, that's quite useful because we know which keys have been pressed. You notice some keys do have funny names for them, which is, I think, worth mentioning. So the number keys, you notice, count as D1, D2, D3, D4, not just the number that you might expect, and that's what's registered in the program. So this is quite a useful tool to see what the different keys are called on your keyboard. We can make this work for us and be quite useful. For example, we could say if the Q key was pressed, we'll do something. So let's take this out and just say, should we leave it in? Why not? We'll say if last key equals Q, then, now Q is going to store as a string, so I'm just going to put in speech marks. It doesn't understand Q. Then we can quit the program. I think it's in program. Dot. I'm sure we can quit. End. Ends the program. Let's try that. So if the last key pressed is Q, then we end the program. We'll just end our if statement. And I might put a comment in here just so I know what this one does. Quits. Oh. Quits program on Q press. Might just put a bit of white space in there so it's a little bit clearer to see separated from this bit. Let's just go and run that and try the Q program and just see what happens. So the game's running. If I press Q, I see an issue we've got here. How is Q denoted with a capital Q? So let's try this again, but change what we're checking for to be a capital Q. That confused me for a second. Let's try that one more time and just see what Q does this time. So the program's running, hit Q, and sure enough the program quits. And this is a really good example why it's quite useful to see what keys are stored as, because it can change, of course, what your program does.